So let's begin and daven that the zchut of our learning should help to bring home all of the rest of the hostages and protect our soldiers and Am Yisrael, all of the innocents, and bring a speedy end to our wars, and also be an Ilui Neshama for my mother, Shlomalaya Bas Rachel.
Amen.
And Menachem Mendel. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. All right. So last time, let me just see. Michael Schwartz, did you listen to the last year?
Yes, I did. It was a lot of it was on that going through Sefer Shmuel, the part with that pasuk is.
Right. Exactly. So we're going to do a little bit of that today. Also, we have two other psukim to do. Okay. Still in this sugya about somebody who's been stricken by bulmos. And so the last time we read this review that. So Michael Werner, you can read. You should do this perfectly because we just week. 1 second, I'll make it a little bigger. Okay. Tanu Rabbanan.
Tanu Rabbanan. Misha Exo Abomus Meachalino do Devash Vechol Mine Matika Shehadavar Vechol Mine Matika.
Read this word again.
Oh, Shehadavar Vechol Mine Matika Me'erin Me'or Anaiv Shel Adam. Ve'af al pi she'en raya ledavar, zachar ledavar. Ra'una ki oru ani ki ta'amti me'at davash hazeh.
Okay, so tell us what all that means.
Someone who is seized by Bomos, we feed him honey and all kinds of sweet things. Since honey and all kinds of sweets light up the eyes, light up or illuminate the light of the eyes of a person. And even though we don't have a proof text for this matter, we do have an allusion, a reminder.
What's
and quote, please see that my eyes lit up since I tasted a little of this honey.
Okay, so so let's just understand this again. And so what's the halachic point of this braita? What's the halacha that I get from here?
That if somebody is seized by bulmos during Yom Kippur, we feed him a little bit of honey or some other sweet thing, since that will make his eyes light up, and lighting up the eyes is where we stop, according to the previous passage that we looked at. That's where we stop feeding somebody who's been seized by bulmos on Yom Kippur.
Right. So the only thing I would say is it doesn't say a little bit, a little. It just says we feed him. We feed him however much is necessary to have his eyes light up. And then and then as you said, even though there isn't a proof for this, even though there isn't a proof for what?
Or, well, actually, this could be read in two ways. Either, well, I guess we don't have a we don't have a proof that that feeding somebody Davash or some other kind of sweet will make his eyes light up, and therefore it'll be sufficient for feeding somebody who's been seized by Bomos on Yom Kippur.
Right. In other words, so we don't actually have a proof that feeding somebody sweets who's been stricken by bull moose, that would be a cure for him. But we do have some kind of a hint or an allusion from this pasuk. And so what's the hint from this pasuk that this is true?
So these are the words of Yonatan, where after after his raid on the Philistine had basically led them to flee and it actually put them in a panic. He ate, and after the Philistines, after the Philistine had been defeated, he ate a little bit of Davash, not knowing that his father had decreed that anybody who ate Davash until the Philistine had been defeated was liable to death.
Okay, so what's the proof for our purposes? In other words, what's the zecher here?
The zecher is that Yonatan says, look, guys, I ate this and my eyes lit up.
Right. By the way, just as a technical thing, this word na, which you translated as please, it not often means please, as you translated it. It can also just mean now. You can look the Targum. I didn't. Targum usually translates it, I think, ka'an, kaf ayin nun, and that has that meaning of now. But okay, I'll leave that. You can look that up yourself. But that's just a little translation note. Okay, so it's not a proof that this is going to help somebody with bull moose, but it's a zecher. So Gemara says, "Umay afal pi shein raya davar." What does that mean?
Even though we don't have a proof text for this matter.
So what's the Gemara's question here? Umay afal pi shein raya davar.
So why is it that we have this halacha even without a proof text?
Not exactly. Michael Schwartz, do you know?
I think they're saying, what does it mean? What does that phrase mean? Why isn't it a proof of the thing?
Yeah, it's is literally means what. So it's asking what is the meaning of this phrase, afal pi shein raya davar, in our context. That is, what might I think if I look at this pasuk? What might I think? Or why might I think? I'll be more explicit. Why might I think it is in fact a proof?
I mean, it does mean, it does describe an episode in which somebody, the king's son, no less, ate Davash and his eyes lit up.
So, right, so we have a case of some,
At least it's anecdotal evidence. That it,
yeah, so, if, yeah, it's an interesting point you make. It is anecdotal evidence, but okay, I'll talk about that in a second. Well, my afal pishin rayala davar means, so what is the what is the Braita here mean when it says even though there isn't a proof? Because it seems like there is a proof, because we have somebody who is very hungry, who eats a little bit of dvash and his eyes light up. So why isn't that a proof for our case? That is, somebody who has a bull moose, which we understand to be a disease that makes someone ravenous. And the halacha says that you're supposed to give him some dvash or give him dvash or any kind of sweet thing. So why isn't it a proof? So the Gemara answers by saying, "The hatam lav bulmus achazeh." What does that mean?
Yonatan was not seized by Bulmos.
Okay, what do the words mean?
Um, we've actually looked at this phrase before.
What's hatam mean?
That's what I know we've looked at this. I
That's
know
you're trying to remember.
I'm trying to remember.
Okay, Michael Schwartz.
Yeah, it means there, it's referring to the pasuk from Sefer Shmuel.
Right. So we have this word hatam, which means it's the cognate of sham. The taf in the Aramaic is exchanged for the shin in Hebrew. And it has an extra hey at the beginning, but it's the same word as sham. There. So when do we use this term there in the Gemara? When did we use this before hatam?
We use it when we were comparing, for example, the Braita with the Mishnah, and bringing in like a second source as a proof.
Right, or second, right. In other words, earlier we had it actually with two different braitot, and sometimes you'll have it with a braita, and then we'll bring in a mishnah. And so whatever our main topic is, or whatever our main source is, I should say, whatever the main source is, the Gemara will refer to that as hacha here, and whatever the source that's being brought in is going to be called there, hatam. So what's the hatam here? What's the hatam? It's a little confusing. What's the hatam referring to?
In this case, it's the pasuk from Sefer Shmuel.
Right. So there in the pasuk from Sefer Shmuel, lav bulmus achzeh. So what do those words mean?
He was not seized by Bulmos.
Right. He was not seized by bulmus. Lav bulmus achzeh. The yud hey ending here, a, makes it it means that it refers to him. Achazeh. It took hold of him. Love bulmus achazeh. A bulmus did not take hold of him. Okay. And so therefore what? So therefore it's not a raya. But so what do you see? If Yonatan, in fact, if the Navi, if Shmuel had said, Sefer Shmuel had said that Yonatan was seized by bulmus and then he ate. So then would this have been a raya?
Yes.
Yes. So and even though it's just one anecdote, In other words, so it's an interesting thing that it would have been sufficient to say that if this had been the case or a case of bull moose, and we brought a single case that would have testified to this healing property of dvash for bull, but since it's not talking about bull moose specifically, so it's a zecher. It's a lower form of proof. It's not an absolute proof, but it's an allusion to this idea. In other words, so it supports our idea that if somebody is struck by bulmus, that if they have some devash, that it will make their eyes light up. Okay, good. Michael Schwartz, Amara Baye. You're muted. Start again.
Oh, my, it's all messed up. You hear me now?
Yes, I do.
Okay, okay, and my thing is not working right. Anyway, Amar Abai, Lo Shanu Ele Le'acher Achila, Aval Kodem Achila, Megarer Gerir, Dedaktiv, Beyibtsu Ish Mitzri Besadeh, Yihu Oto El David, Vayiten Lo Lechem, Vayachal, Vayishkahu Mayim, Vayitnu Lo Pelach Devala, ושני צימוקים, ויחל ותשב רוחו עליו, כי לא אכל לחם ולא שתה מים 3 ימים ו3 לילות.
Okay, so let's see if we can understand this. So what does Abaye say? Lo shanu. What does that mean? Lo shanu.
This was not taught. This was not taught except for in the case of after eating. But before eating, megarer garir, it's dragged. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so literally, yeah, like the basic meaning of the gror is to drag, but it means to like it will what's the word? It'll spark somebody's appetite. It'll, in other words,
Whet their appetite.
It will make them whet their appetite. It'll make them want to eat more. And then we bring this pasuk. So we'll do a little bit of what we did last week. We're going to look at the pasuk in context. But before we do, so what is Abai talking about? We didn't learn, it wasn't taught except for after eating. What wasn't taught except for after eating?
We were talking about his eyes lighting up after eating. It doesn't seem to make sense.
Well, what's the main thing that we were talking about? What's the main din?
So we're allowed to feed someone with bulmus. We're allowed to feed him honey or something sweet until his eyes light up.
Okay, so and then what we said. So what we're saying is, if you have something sweet to eat, that will make your eyes light up, right? And Abaye says, so we didn't learn that except after eating.
So maybe his eyes will only light up
but before eating.
But before eating. So if you feed him the honey after he's eaten something, then his eyes will light up. But if you feed it before he eats, then it makes him hungry. It'll make him want to eat more.
Basically, yes.
Okay.
Right. That seems to be what the Gemara is saying. And we'll come back to that in a moment. And let's see. This is the pasuk, but let's go. So to get this entire context, we'd have to go back a little further. But let me make sure you see the same screen I do. Okay, so do you see Shmuel Aleph
Yeah.
here? Okay. All right, so let's read this story a little bit. So this won't be as long as last week because we only have about 10 psukim to go until we get to the two psukim that we're interested in. But go ahead and read. Vayihi.
ויהי בבוא דוד ואנשיו ציקלג, ביום השלישי והעמלקי פשטו אל נגב ועל ציקלג, ויכו את ציקלג וישרפו אותו באש. Do you want
Okay,
to translate or
so just
continue?
yeah, I want you to translate.
So when David, the coming of David and his people, his men, Ziklag is at a place.
It's a place.
Okay, on the third day, and the Amalekite was spread out over the Negev or to the south and towards Ziklag and they struck Ziklag and they burnt it in fire.
Okay. So go ahead.
Vayishbu David v'anashav el ha'ir
It doesn't
v'hine.
say David, it says Vayishbu. Read it again.
I'm sorry. I thought I was reading Gimel. I'm sorry. Vayishvu et hanashim asher ba v'mikatan v'ad gadol lo hemitu ish v'yinhagu v'yelchu l'darcham. And
Okay.
the women sat. The women sat, and that
No, Vayishbu. What does Vayishbu mean? Not Vayishbu, Vayishbu. Like Chevy.
no. Oh, they returned. No.
No.
Oh
Oh,
no, I don't know.
both good.
They provided, no?
It means they took captive.
Oh, I should know that.
Okay, Vayishbu. You should know it from we have other places in the Torah where we have that verb.
Also
Like
current affairs.
Parshat, and also yes, also well, it's interesting. I thought about that because so in modern Hebrew for the term hostage they use chatufim. The verb would be
Chatufim,
lachtof.
yeah.
All right, the chatufim. So in modern usage they use that term. Lishbot would mean to also means to it means to take captive. So I'm not sure. I don't know the history of why they chose the word chatufim or lachtov, but I think they wanted to distinguish in modern Hebrew. They want to make this distinction between a soldier who's taken captive and a civilian who's taken captive. Now here, this is war, right? So they're at war. David is at war with the Amaleki, with Amalek, and the Torah, the Tanakh, it doesn't distinguish. If you take captives, you take captives. But I think that in context, and I haven't checked this in every place, but I'm pretty sure this is correct. If you're at war, you didn't take soldiers as captives. You killed soldiers. Who do you take captives? You take women and children as captives. So the term only refers really to what we would call civilians. Because who else would you take captive? Everybody else you kill. I think that's true. I think that's correct. But so in Hebrew, I don't know. I'd have to do some research about why they use, but lachtof, right, comes from the term to grab. And in the usage that we understand it, it's that, that the chatufim were people who were grabbed from their civilian lives and taken. And we use it to apply, in the context of the current crisis, we use it to apply also to soldiers who were taken. Now, why why we do this? So part of it is we don't. So from the Israeli point of view, we're not distinguishing between soldiers who were taken captive and civilians who were taken captive, even though, I'm not a international law expert, but there is a distinction. There is difference between taking civilians captive and soldiers. But in Tanakh, as far as I know, all the places where people are taken captive, it's only civilians. I don't think you don't have this idea that you would take soldiers captive and hold them. What, would be the use of that? And also, it's not easy. I think the basic idea is, soldiers that try to kill you, you kill them first. And you're not going to go to the trouble and expense of holding soldiers. What are you going to do with them? The whole idea of holding people captive, the idea of, let's say, Beta Asurim, like Yosef was in a Beta Asurim, which just means, right, the house of prisoners, people who were uh, bound or locked up. So what was the point of that? Until, again, I'm not an expert on this, but to the best of my knowledge, most of history, the societies didn't maintain prisons the way we do nowadays. Prisons as such they were holding places until somebody would be sentenced. Keep people, so it generally, if you can still hear me, am I still with you?
Yeah, you're in and out a little bit, but I hear you now.
Yeah, okay. I don't know, Michael Werner, maybe you have something to add to that about history of I just know that in Western countries, the idea of a prison, like holding people for years or even till the rest of their life, was, I think, an institution of the late 18th or early 19th century. This idea of the penitentiary, where you take criminals and you put them in a penitentiary to do penitence. And, and not necessarily even to be there for their whole life, but maybe to be there for years on end. This is a bit of a digression, but maybe you have some comment in your knowledge of this.
So that is true. However, certainly in the Middle Ages, one would take a knight captive and hold him as hostage for ransom.
Mm.
And they could be held for a long time.
So you would take a knight, let's say you mean in battle.
Yes.
But because he's a knight and he has a certain amount of status and presumably some wealth, it would be worth your while to hold on to him to get something in exchange.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that also makes sense. But otherwise, let's say women and children, I don't know about the Middle Ages, but we see from the Torah itself, that in the war against Midian, right, that all the men were killed, but all the women except for women who had not known men, right? So very young girls, right, were taken captive. And in other places we have people who are taken captive. Okay, anyway, so just to get back to this. So David is at war with Amalek, and the Amaleki spread out in the south to Ziklag, and they smote Ziklag and burnt it in fire, and then they took the women who were in it, right, in Ziklag, they took them captive, right? Mikaton va'ad gadol. Is that Michael Schwartz? You're still translating. Mikaton v'ad gadol.
Me, gotcha. From the small one until the large one, age of the women. And they did not kill man, and they led they led them and led and went on their way.
Okay, so let's keep going. Vayavo David,
Vayivod David Vanashav al Ir Vahine Srufa Be'esh Vaneshehem Uvnehem Uvnotehem Nishbu. So David came and his people to the city, and they burnt in fire, and the women and the boys, the sons and the daughters, they took captive.
not exactly. So who burnt down Siklag?
David and his
Oh,
and his
no,
army. No?
that Amalekim.
The Amaleki went to
Oh, I understand.
Siklag and they burnt it down. Siklag was a place that was held by David, and the Amaleki took the women captive, and they didn't kill any men, but they did take the women captive, and then they went on their way. Now what happens? David and his men come to the city. They came to the city. Vihine srufa ba'esh. What does that mean?
They burnt the city they burnt the city in fire.
The city
Well,
had been burnt.
hine, the right, srufa, it's passive. Hine,
Oh,
behold, srufa ba'esh. It was burnt by fire.
they saw it was burnt. Okay.
Okay, unshehem uvnehem uvnotehem nishbu.
And the women and the boys and the girls had been taken captive.
Right. So they had been off, and then when they came back, they found that their city had been burnt and the women and children had been taken captive. Um, okay. A slight tension between Bet and Gimel about who was taken captive, but say women and children. Go ahead, do Daled, Vayisa David.
ויסד אביו העם אשר איתו את כולם ויבכו עד אשר אין בהם כוח לבכות. And David went up,
Lifted, yeah, raised.
raised, and the people that were with him, they raised their voices and they cried until they couldn't cry anymore, till there was no energy left to cry anymore.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Pasuk A.
ושתי נשי דוד נשבו אחינם ויזרעאלית ואביגל אשת נבל הכרמלי. And the two women of David were captured, Achinoam, the Israelite, and Avigal, the wife of Nabal the Carmelite. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. V'tatzer leDavid ma'od ki amru am v'iskulo ki mara nefesh kol am isha banav va'al benotav v'yitkazek David b'Hashem Adonai Elokav. And David was very upset, and the people said to him to stone him.
That's what it seems to say. Yeah. So
Because he was very his soul was very bitter, and all the people, the man and his son and his daughters, and they strengthened. And David was strengthened in Hashem.
right. So
Their soul was grieved, not David's.
well, Kimara Nefesh Kol Ha'am.
Okay.
Right. So the people thought here, how do they say? David was greatly distressed. The people spoke of stoning him because the soul of all the people was grieved, every man for his sons and for his daughters. but David strengthened himself in Hashem, his God. So why would the people want to stone David?
Oh, right. Well, their city was captured, so they were upset with David for letting it happen.
Presumably, right? He's in charge. He's the king, and
He failed to protect the city.
failed to protect the city. So things are bad. Okay, but David, vayitchazek David b'Hashem Elokav. So even though, right, just before David and all of the people cried, everybody cried until they had no strength to cry anymore. And David's own wives had been captured. So and Vatetel David Meod, right? So he was very upset because the people talked about stoning him, because everybody's soul was very bitter, right? People were really deeply upset about their children, about their Ishal Banav al Banotav, about their sons and daughters. It doesn't say here again. There's each of these iterations has a slightly different version. Right? The first we say that all of the women were captured. The second one, they see that the women and the boys and girls are captured. And here it says that they're bitter about the capture of their sons and daughters and leaves out the wives. But we can assume that for the purposes of our reading here, that they were upset about all of them. So, but David was mitchazek b'Hashem Elokav. So he strengthened himself. Yitzchazek is a reflexive form. He was, he was like reinforced himself, as it were, with Hashem. So what does David do? Okay, Michael Werner, why don't you take over? Vayomer David.
Yomer David el Abitar HaKohen ben Achimelech Hagisana li Haifod.
Hagisha.
Hagishana li Haifod. V'Hagesh Abitar et Haifod el David.
Okay, can make that a little bit.
Continue.
So first explain what that means.
So David said to Avitar the Kohen, the son of Achimelech, to please bring the ephod, meaning presumably the Urim and Tumim here, and Avitar did so.
Right. While we're here, 1 second, I'll show you something. So I'm just pointing out, we also have this word na here, hagisha na. You see the Targum says kariv, bring close, or it's the equivalent, it means the same thing, to bring forth, ka'an. It uses this word ka'an. And ka'an also can mean different things in Aramaic, but it's the default translation of the word na. Ka'an, now. You see, this is how Jastrow explains it. Na. So bring now. This is worthy of another discussion if we do a little bit more work in Tanakh and with Targum. But I just wanted to point that out. So he's saying, in other words, to bring it now, bring it right away. The ephod, and as you said, certainly Chazal understood that the ephod here was the ephod of the Kohen, right? So Evyatar is the Kohen. He's the Kohen that's traveling with David. He was David's Kohen, and he has the ephod, and And then we would understand what we understand is that ephod has the breastplate, and the breastplate has the stones, and that was the vehicle of the Urim V'Tumim to ask, to get God's advice. So keep going. Vayishal David. Oh, Michael Werner.
I'm sorry. Where
That's
are we?
okay. I know you warned me, but so you missed my summary, but that's okay. We're in the next pasuk. Vayishal David.
Vayishal David Bashem Lemor Erdof Acharei Hagidud Hazeh Bahasi Genu Vayomer Lo Rodof Ki Haseg Tasig Hatzel Tatzil.
Okay, so what does that all mean?
So David asked, presumably the Urim and Tumim, or it asked of Hashem, saying, "Do I pursue after this mob?"
Well, Gedu to be like, in modern Hebrew, we use it as it's also a military term, but like a unit of soldiers. Basically, what it means here.
Um, and God, Hashem said to him,
Wait, I'm sorry, you skipped the word ha'asigenu.
"Oh, and um,
Okay, we have to so the ha at the beginning is making this into a. I'm sorry, didn't hear you.
and from context, sounds like it's an attack, or
So the hey here is a hey of tmiyah. It's a hey that turns the word into a question. Waiting a second. Okay. I get these little pop-ups that tell me my internet connection is unstable. So I'm trying to just stop talking when I see them until it goes away. Ha'asiganu. So what's lahasig? Michael Schwartz.
To like overtake, to obtain or overtake.
Right, lahasig, right. Right, it means to reach, and in this context, it would be to reach them, to overtake them. Ha'asig. So ha'asigenu. So the nu is. So what does ha'asigenu mean? Will I asig nu? Will I get them? Will I be able to take them? So that was his question, right? So David asked a question of Hashem, saying, Erdof acharei hagdud hazeh ha'asigenu. Should I chase after this gedud, after this group of soldiers? Will I reach them? Will I take them? Vayomer lo redof. Michael Werner, if you can, so translate the rest of the pasuk.
okay. So remind me where we are here.
We're at this. Vayomer lo redof.
Vayomer lo Rodolf, he haseg tasig hatzel tatzil. And God said to him, "Pursue, because you will overtake them. You will surely overtake them, and clearly be victorious over them."
But what's the hatzil?
Mm. To
Michael Schwartz, what's the hatzil?
rescue, no?
You're muted.
Oh,
yeah, to
Yeah,
rescue, not
yeah,
to
to
be
rescue, to save,
victorious,
yeah.
to rescue, to save, right? Not to be victorious. So be careful, because I know you like to add in from context, but think more carefully about the words. So we have this word. So he says, "You right." So the hasig is to reach, and that you will save them. You'll see in the Targum. What's the Targum of haseg? The same root in Hebrew, right? To stick to. In other words, will you reach them? Will you get up to them? See how they right. So here they say overtake. In this context, it has the implication of being of overtaken. Okay, so David. So what's the point? They come. So David and his troops come back. They find that their city has been overtaken by Amalek, and their women and children have been taken prisoner. People are completely distraught. But David, what's his reaction? His first reaction is also to be distraught. But what's his second reaction?
Bring up the, have the priest bring the Urim and Turim into me.
Okay. Okay. So, well, okay. So that's what we just read. So, but I just want to remind you that before he brings the ephod, what did it say? Vayitchazek David b'Shem Elokav. Or it's his reaction. His first reaction, of course, is he's completely overtaken with with grief or being upset, like everybody else. But David, who is the leader, he gets hold of himself and he reinforces himself with God. And how does he do that? He has Evyatar Kohen bring the ephod, and they consult God. He wants to know: Am I going to be able to attack and get back uh, our our hostages, right? Our captives. So, Michael Werner, go ahead. Vaylech David.
וילך דוד הוא ושש מאות איש אשר איתו ויבואו עד נחל הבשור.
Abasor.
Abasor, sorry, yes, I see that, yes, thank you. והנודרים עמדו. And David and 600 of the men who were with him.
Okay, so what is it?
And went and came to the river, the of the Sor.
Yeah, it's the name of the river, Nachal Habsor.
And
It's also the name of a street in Yaffo where one of my children lives.
Oh. It's also the name of a street in Beit Shemesh in our neighborhood.
Okay, so this is where David came to the actual Nachal Habsor. V'hanotarim amadu. What does that mean?
and the others position themselves.
Well, what
Stood
does
by.
amadu mean? They stood. So
They
to
stood.
stand doesn't necessarily only mean literally just to stand on your legs. It means to stop, right? We also like amod, right? Stop, and so it means that they stayed there. They stayed where they were. And so what does notarim literally means? Why? What's the root of notar?
Is it like the remainder?
Right, the remainder. So who's the remainder?
The people who did not accompany David.
Yes, so David only takes 600 men, and he leaves the rest to be in Ziklag. Okay, and we're getting very close to our desired pasuk here, psukim. So go ahead, Michael. Michael Schwartz, why don't you pick it up again? Vayerdov David.
Vayirif David hu va'arba ma'ot ish va'amdu ma'atayim ish asher pigru me'avor et nachal basar. And David, he and 400 of the men, uh, 400 men, and and 200 stood, 200 men stood that Pigru on the other side of the river. And I'm not sure what Pigru means.
Okay, so Pigru. So here, Michael Werner, what would you say Pigru means based on context? Because maybe you know what it means exactly, but I'm assuming maybe you don't know what it means. So what happened? David set out with 600 men. So David then, and they go to Nachal Habsor.
And David crossed
David
over.
chases after. He has
Uh,
400 men, and 200 men are standing, which we now understand means that they stayed where they were. Matayim asher pigru.
They held back. They stayed behind.
Yeah, they
On the
stayed
other side.
behind. Right. So, in modern Hebrew, we have, of somebody who is retarded is called a mifager,
um,
right? And that's what it means. It means a retarded, literally a retarded person who's held back or stayed back, right? So here they say exhausted or faint, and in the Targum he translates it as di'it mina'u, which is from the same root in Hebrew as manav, meaning held back. Okay, so and pigru they translated with it. There are other places where it has this, where the context would indicate uh, that not just being held back, but people who were exhausted. There are places like that. I know how they translate it here. Here they say, who were so faint that they could not go over the brook Besor. Okay. All right. A Sherpi group could just mean that they stayed back, or you could say means that they were exhausted and they couldn't go. All right. Either way. But David now is at Nachal Besor. He crosses over with 400 out of the 600. Michael, we're going to continue.
וימצאו איש המצרי בשדה, ויקחו אותו אל דוד, ויתנו לו לחם ויאכל, וישקהו מים.
Okay, so translate all that.
And they found an Egyptian man in the field, and they took him to David, and they gave him bread, and he ate, and he drank water.
Okay, more specifically, vayashkuhu mayim. What does vayashkuhu mean?
Mm.
If it meant that he drank water, it would say vayishak mayim. What's vayashkuhu mayim?
they made him drink.
They gave him to
gave him
drink.
water, yeah.
Right. It could be they made him, but it means that in other words, it's a causative form, right? From lehashkot, right? To give water to, or to give drink to. Okay, so they find this Egyptian guy. He's out in the field. So he's just a lone guy. And so first they feed him and they give him to drink. And now we're up to the second pasuk we need to understand. By Nulo, go ahead, Michael Werner.
You're muted.
V'yitnu lo pelach devela ushne zimukim v'yochal v'tashev rucho alive ki lo achal lechem v'lo shta mayim shelosha yamim shlosha lailot.
Okay, so do you know what a felach tefillah is?
No.
Okay, Michael Schwartz, you're
Uh,
familiar with this?
Felach, I don't know, but devela is a pressed fig cake. So a piece of a
Right.
pressed pig, piece or whatever portion of it.
Yeah, a piece of a fig. In other words, and when we say a fig cake, it's beila. As you say, it's a cake of pressed figs, not a Mizonos cake. In other words, it's like that's the way people would and still do. Where you take figs, you dry them out, and you press them together, and that's how they're transported and sold. It's also the tvela. You see it here in Tanakh. And it's also a term that Chazal used. So felach would be a piece of. In modern Hebrew, also you have it. Let's say a like in an orange, you have the different sections of the orange.
Oh,
Those
like
are
a
each
slice, a
a
section, yeah.
slice. Right. So it's a natural slice. So those are also called a pelach. All right. Not to be confused with pelech with the chaf at the end, which means a distaff. Okay. Okay. So anyway, so what happened with this guy? They find this Mitzri. They bring him to David, and first they give him bread and he eats, and then he drinks, and then they give him, what else do they give him? They give him specifically Pelach de Vela, give him a slice of figs, Ushnei Tsimukim. So what are Tsimukim?
Raisins.
So presumably these are raisins. So I'm not sure in this context, two Tsimukim doesn't sound like a lot of raisins. So it could be that Tsimukim here also refers to like a clump, the
Yeah,
same way that the Devela does. Anyway, but they give him, what are they giving him to eat now after he had bread?
sweet things.
They're giving him sweet things. And what happens as a result? Tashav rucho elav. What does that mean?
And his spirit comes back. His spirit's revived.
Yes, his right. So his spirit is revived. So this is what really helps him. And why was this so? Ki lo achalechem v'lo l'shatamayim shlosha yamim u'shlosha leilot. Meaning what?
He hadn't eaten for he hadn't eaten or drank for 3 days and 3 nights.
Okay. So what's the result so all of this to say, what was the result of giving him something sweet?
His spirit was revived after he ate the sweet things.
Right. Anyway, so then they go, we're not going to do the rest. You can do it by yourselves. But the but uh they use him for intelligence because he's been out in what's presumably a desert or a wilderness areas in the south, and he hasn't eaten or drunk for 3 days. Um, so initially when they take him, it could be just to be nice to him, but once he's revived, they pump him for information, and here they're going to use him to get to the Amaleki. Okay, but let's just finish off back here. Back here now. Amar Abaye lo shanu ela la'achar achila. So they didn't learn this. They didn't learn that feeding somebody sweet things will, revive them, right? That will make their eyes light up. Only after eating, but before eating, but before eating, it just makes him more, more hungry, more desirous of eating. The because we see here, Vayimtzu ish mitzri. So then it quotes these last two psukim that we did. So what's Abaye's point? What's he trying to tell us based on the psukim that we just learned in Shmuel?
The Mitzri did not, his spirit wasn't revived until he had something sweet, and it was after he actually ate bread and drank water. So I think he's extending that to Bulmus, in that we learn that sweet things causes one's eyes to light up, but it's only after one eats properly.
Yeah. So in other words, Abaye isn't here just pontificating or just going on about this. There's a halachic implication. The halachic implication would be that this idea that the Braita introduced, that you should give somebody who has bulmus, you should give them something sweet until their eyes light up. Abaye says, based on what we see from this story with David and the Mitzri, it's only really going to work if you give them other food first, and then you give them the sweet thing. So we're going to stop here today. We'll pick up next time, and we'll have we have we have some interesting had been seized by Bulmus and what they did as a result. So we'll pick that up next time. So thank you, everybody, and especially Michael Werner, because I saw you did make quite a valiant. You're making valiant efforts to stay awake. I do appreciate that. And in the meantime, everybody have a good week, and Bezrat Hashem will pick up from here next week.
All right, thanks. Good night.
Bye-bye.